Welcome to the RC Roundtable Podcast, where we discuss the latest RC hobby news, events, model reviews, and a whole lot more.
Hello, Lee.
Hello, Terry.
And we're missing Fitz, but we would like Fitz to be here. He's, on a plane somewhere?
He's on a jet plane.
Yeah.
Far away.
Yeah. All right, so
drinking sake.
Do they serve that on the jetliner?
He might.
Yeah.
He might.
It's BYOS. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing here. This is not a podcast. This is not an RC Roundtable episode.
Repeat, right? This is not a podcast.
So this is an idea that I've been brewing in my head for a long time, and we're finally going to pull the trigger on it and see if it's something we want to stick with. But the basic idea is that on our podcast, all the time, we're talking about stuff we buy at swap meets, stuff we buy off Facebook Marketplace, stuff we
questionable things we buy at swap meets and at Marketplace.
And the stuff we buy from auctions and spend way too much money on shipping for. So we talk about all these things we gather.
Damn, you had to touch on that.
Yeah, that's a new...
I told you I got the bill for that, right?
Yeah, that was nuts.
You know what I'm going to do? When I get that box in, I'm going to measure it. I'm going to weigh it. I'm going to see how much it'll cost me to ship it back to them.
Right. And let's do that on the next podcast so we can shame that shipper. That'll be another thing we can do. Shame the shipper.
There we go.
That'll be a segment. Okay. So what we're talking about is we often discuss all these different things we get, whether it's airplanes, cars, boats, tools, all the stuff we gather, but we never really talk about what we do with it once we have it. And basically how we restore these things, how we fix these things up, how we just polish them and put them on the shelf, whatever it is. We want to discuss how we incorporate these things into our collections and share some of the skills that we utilize for that, and also hear back from you guys and gals on the way that you do these similar things. So maybe it'll be a discussion about how we operate in the hobby with these used items. And we've got a bunch. I know I've got a pile of stuff here waiting for me to work on. I know I can literally see a pile of things behind you. And Fitz looks like he's buried in a hoarder's cavern.
This really should be Fitz's show because he could run it for 5 years, man.
Yeah. So our working title of this is RC Rescue. And right now we're only planning to do videos of it. And we'll see if it works. We'll see where it goes. But that's what you've tuned into now, and we appreciate your feedback and comments on it, and we'll just play it by ear and see what happens. So what we're recording now is the first instance of this. It may not be the first one we release, but it's the first one we're recording. And the item I've chosen to discuss is, are you ready? My title gives it away. The Kyosho Jet 800. So I've talked about this boat on some podcast episode. I don't remember what. I received it with another Kyosho boat, an old one, that I bought off Facebook Marketplace and got shipped to me. So the things we discussed then are that it's obviously old. It's yellowed. Someone jokingly called it a cigarette boat, not because of the shape, but because it looks like it's been in a house that's full of smoker.
I love this boat.
But it ran when I got it, and some of the things that are unique about it, at least what was unique about it then, it has twin motors. Not all of them had twin motors, but this one had the twin motor upgrade in it. It also had the mechanical speed control with the resistor. So there was a lot of stuff crammed inside here. And in stock form, not only is there no water cooling, there's no air ventilation through here. So this was just an easy bake oven where
riding on the water.
I don't know what it was like before, but I assume you had to let this thing cool down for a while between every run.
That'd be so cool if you could stick a little thermometer in there for a minute and see what the temperature goes up to.
Yeah, I guess the good news is...
you know what? You get one of those turkey thermometers you put in there and see if it pops.
All right. Well, That would have been fine then, but I've made some upgrades. I guess the
Okay.
good news in the old days is the NiCad you would have used to run this thing was only 1200 milliamp hours, so you weren't going to get a ton of runtime anyway. So you just go till it glows red, and then you bring it in and let it cool off. So what I had done initially was basically ripped out the mechanical speed control, put in an electronic speed control, and I discussed how I ran it initially with a 2-cell A123 pack, which is a 7.2 volt fully charged power, and that's not quite what a 6-cell NiCad would be. That's like 9 volts. So I didn't expect it to have the top speed of NiCad, but the NiCad drops off quickly. So I thought the 2-cell A123 would be fine, and it was. But then I had some buddies over, and they said, hey, let's try a 2-cell LiPo in there, which is initially 2 cells is what, 8.4 volts, but it holds a much higher voltage than that A123 did. And there was a visible difference in the speed and maneuverability of this thing with the 2-cell LiPo. So with that, I decided I'm probably going to run this thing on 2-cell LiPo most of the time. And I made some upgrades after that initial talk that I want to go over now. So I'll take the cover off here, and you can see the physical things that I did are pretty rudimentary. I cut a hole in the hatch, and then I made a scoop using a plastic spoon. Have you ever done that on an airplane or anything? You just cut the
Oh
front.
yeah, absolutely.
So simple. Just cut a hole that's a little bit smaller than the spoon. You glue the spoon on with goop, which is my favorite glue to use on everything. And you got a nice little scoop there. And in this location, I wasn't too worried about water coming in or anything like that. And then to let that cooling air out, I drilled some holes in the back here to get some hot air out. And I also added some heat sinks to the motors here, so to help them cool off a little bit better. And I added a larger capacity speed control. I'd already put in a modern ESC, but I just upgraded it to a larger one because I noticed that that original one did get warm during runs. So I did those things. And initially, I also pulled out the shaft from the stuffing tube and greased that and greased the U-joint here. You can see that that is all part of the stern drive unit or whatever that's called. So I greased all that up and everything was fine. And I also put in a 2.4 gigahertz Spectrum radio system, but that's a simple swap. So this deck back here was stuffed full of another servo for the mechanical speed control, the speed control itself, the resistor for the speed control, all that stuff. That came out and just got replaced by the one speed control here. So I think we saved a little bit of weight with that. Some of that weight savings is offset because a 2-cell LiPo is a little bit heavier than a 6-cell NiCad. But if we want to make real comparisons here, that 6-cell NiCad, like I said, was probably 1200 milliamp hour. The LiPo I'm using is 5000. So we're going to get good runtime out of this for, I think it's about another ounce or an ounce and a half of weight.
So was your CG still the same when you switched to the LiPo?
It was darn close, and it planes pretty well. And I did measure the CG, but I don't know how critical it is here. I don't think it's very critical because it gets on plane well. It doesn't bounce a lot. It doesn't bounce at all, really. So whatever that CG range is, it's fine now with the LiPo in it. Now, another thing that I did mostly for vanity reasons is, where did I put this? Here it is. The motors that were originally in it stock are these Le Mans 360 ST motors. You can see here. Here's one of them. And now in the current era of vintage RC, these are collector's items. Pretty much any of the Le Mans motors are. And I didn't like the idea that these are buried inside this boat where nobody can see them. So my idea was to replace these with some other modern brushed motor equivalent to run in the boat, and then it could have the two motors out of here to put in an RC, a Kyosho RC car where it's nicely on display. So I had to do some research about what this motor actually is. Do you know what 360 means in 360 ST?
No, I don't.
I'm going to tell you, Lee, the way
Thanks.
and I probably knew this at some point way in my past, but I had to relearn it for this. The way they rated their motors, but was by runtime, our expected runtime. So if you put a 360 ST motor in your Kyosho car, you could expect 360 seconds of runtime or 6 minutes. If you put a 240 in, you could expect 4 minutes of runtime. So presumably a 240 is a hotter motor than a 360. So there you go. I don't know what the ST stands for. There's probably some logic there. But based on that, I found a website that has all the basic specs. And what I learned is that this is a 550 motor, meaning the can is 500 or is it 55 millimeters long, and it's 23 turns. So based on that, I can find a modern equivalent, or at least I tried. What I found was I don't remember the brand, but it's a open end bell. Open end bell like this motor from A Main. Do you ever shop at A Main?
I used to, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's been a good source for me since I started doing this stuff. I went to the AMAN website, looked at brush motors. There are surprisingly few brush motors out there now, and most of them are for crawlers. So the really high winds, like 55 winds or 30 winds. But I did find one that was a 22 turn motor of 540 length. So being a little bit shorter of a 540, it's going to have a little bit less torque, I believe. And also being a 22 turn, it's going to be a little bit faster RPM. And maybe I got those backwards. I'm going to have to fact check myself later. Maybe this is 23, or maybe the new one's 23 and this one's 22. I don't know. They're within one turn of each other. So basically, I assumed it would be pretty darn close. So I got those new motors in, and it was a direct swap. I was able to unbolt these motors from the gearbox in here, bolt the new ones on, swap the pinion gears, and that was it. And also, I had to solder the leads on here. But really, it was less than an hour job to do the swap. What are you
How do the
laughing at?
motors? Uh, oh, and I have to solder.
Oh,
Oh, and I had to buy these specialized screws.
yeah.
How are they mounted? Are they zip tied in, or do they have some type of
How are the motors?
latching? Yeah, are they latched in place?
So this motor has a solid tube in here with a solid drive that comes out the back with a U-joint.
Right.
And the motors are driven through a gearbox. They're not direct drive. And I can pull the front off here to show you. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but I'll post some photos on YouTube. Get that off of there. So maybe you can see that it's all black. So there's basically a bulkhead there or a firewall that both of these motors bolt to, and the pinions come through that firewall and attach to a single spur that drives the shaft. And
Okay.
so to answer your question, they're bolted in. This whole assembly is glued or epoxied into the hull, and then the motors bolt to that.
Gotcha.
Yep. So pretty convenient. And lucky for me, all that stuff was in good shape. The nylon had not deteriorated. The gears were in really good shape. So I can imagine there's other boats of this age where you might have to search for replacement parts. And I don't think they're that easy to find.
Well, that was the key question I was getting to here, is that you replaced the motors, but you had to make sure that the mounting screws fit that firewall, that mount there.
I just used the same motors. The standard on all of these is a 3 millimeter screw.
Okay,
And
but the bolt pattern matched. So
yeah,
what would someone do if it didn't match? I mean, would that be a much harder job to do?
that would be rare because these are standardized. I
Okay,
don't know if
good. So
I've,
that's well, and I'm sharing that for some people who may not know. They might be new to the hobby and they're all used to brushless
yeah.
and so forth, but they're not familiar with the can motors having a standard pattern.
Yeah, I can't think of any exceptions in brushed motors except for Astroflight, which they will have, I believe it's the same bolt distance, but they would use 440 instead of 3 millimeter.
Okay.
And the other difference is the shaft size on the Astroflight motors is a little bit larger. But for most of these Japanese made motors, they're going to be a direct swap. So I didn't
Nice.
have any issues there. Yeah, I just used the same screws and bada bing.
Bada boom.
Yep. So that was it. Again, these heat sinks just snap on into place. That was an easy addition. I did have to grind away a little bit of one of the heat sinks just because these motors are so close together. They interfered a little bit, but that was a quick fix. And I added all those things, put it back on the water, and whatever I guessed one way or guessed the other way, it must have been pretty darn close because I can't tell any difference in the performance of this thing with either the A123 or the LiPo battery. And I don't have any scientific data here, but my my uncalibrated fingers tell me that all the gears running cooler as well. So it would be nice to, like you said, put a turkey thermometer in there and see if it pops. But I'm confident that the little bit of air that's flowing through there help things.
Well, you don't have a base, but you can get a simple thermometer to put in there just to, out of curiosity, find out what temps you're running, at least in the little space there.
Right. Well, I have the luxury of being up here in Wisconsin, where the air's not going to get that hot. Even in the summer, the water's not going to get that hot. Now, if I were down there with you, down in the deep, sweaty armpit of Texas, I would probably be more concerned about that data. But I'm just.
I mean, the water is boiling. You know that, right?
Right. Yeah, the water actually makes the motor hotter.
We can't put boats in the water; they just melt.
So a buddy of mine up here, he has one of these too, and its color has survived much better than mine did. But he added water cooling, so he's got a water pickup on there and water lines, and that works well for him. And I could have done that here. That would have been a lot more overhead than what I did. And my buddy also did a brushless upgrade, so his is like a whole different class of restoration than what this is. Mine's, what would you call it, a resto mod or a super stock, something like that. It's mostly the same, but just a tiny bit hotter, where my buddy's is just let's see how fast we can make this thing go. And it goes fast. He did a good job with it. So using the brush motors, I'm not sure that all the overhead of a water cooling system would have really had much benefit. So,
have you had any issues with that particular purchase of leaking? Is it in good solid shape?
Nope. And that's probably something that someone who's looking to buy a used boat should look for. Just check the hole for cracks along here, either because of blunt force trauma or just age. This nylon can get dry rotted and brittle over time. This one seems to be in good shape. So from what I understand, there are ways to fix it if you do have an example with leaks. I haven't had to do that yet, so I can't really coach anybody on what those techniques are, but I'm sure there's 38 videos on YouTube that tell you how to do that. And I know for a fact that there are several videos specifically on the Kyosho Jetstream 800 because I watched some of those, and there's some people doing neat things with these. These are the original stickers on it, which are a little bit bubbled, but they're still on there, and it would be a shame to peel all that off. But there are people who peel off stickers, paint them, and they get either replica stickers or new old stock stickers and put it all back together. I'm not that committed to this thing. I'm happy just to have this example that's in reasonably good shape and runs well. So my plan for now is to keep running it and hopefully not break it, and just enjoy this piece of RC history.
How does the hatch stay on?
There is a lip here, and then you can see this post in the back. Mm-hmm. I'll put the hatch on in a second, but what's going to happen is there's a hole in the hatch, and this post goes through the hole, and then there's a hole here for a clip, like a body clip used on an RC car.
And you don't seem to get any water in through the top hatch?
Not really. There's always going to be some, but it's not much and not enough that I'm worried about. Okay. If it was an issue, I could put tape around it every time, but that sounds like misery. So who wants to do that? So no, it's never been enough water in there that I was concerned about it. So there you have it.
I don't want you to have what happened to Fitz,
where it sank,
where it goes bye-bye.
Yeah. And one thing I've thought about that probably wouldn't be a bad idea to do is put some foam in the front where there's really nothing going on up here. It's just empty volume, I could maybe spray foam or just blocks of foam put in there. So if for whatever reason it gets stranded on the lake and it takes on water before I can get to it, it wouldn't actually sink. So yeah, you've given me something to shoot for. Maybe I will do that.
Give one of those pilots a flare gun. Call for some help.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, did we talk about the era of this? I don't know when they first came out, but it would have been in the 80s sometimes, maybe the late 80s. So how far back do your Tower Hobbies catalogs go?
83, I think.
Oh, really? You've got every year since 83?
Not every year, but I think I have an 83 and then an 87.
Okay. Well, one thing we should do on these RC Rescue series is you find the Tower Catalogs page for whatever we're talking about, and we can include that on here.
I will try to find it right now. So at this part in the show right now, we'll put a photo, if I find it in the catalog, right here. Otherwise, it's just me and Terry on the screen.
Yeah. So I will include some footage. I don't think, did I take onboard footage? I know I shot some dockside footage of this thing running. I'll have to maybe put a camera on board and shoot some of that too.
Now, that's a speedboat. That sounds like an FPV setup, right? Right? Am I right?
Maybe. I don't know. It sounds kind of dull, but whatever. We can try it.
It's not dull. Everybody had fun when I did it on the tugboat. Which I still have a setup.
Yeah.
It is, but you're looking around. But yeah, on a speedboat, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or not. You don't have to do what I suggest. You never do.
That's not true. Not true. I can't think of an example right now, but I've followed your advice.
Yeah.
At times.
keep thinking.
Yeah.
Well, did we touch on everything about your boat?
I'm probably forgetting things, but I think we got the gist of it. And if there's anybody who's watching who has questions about it, post a comment. We'll try to keep up with those. If you have comments about the format of what we're doing here, say no dummies, do it this way, or I really want to see this, or here's how I fixed my old boat, let us know. Send us an email at contact@rcroundtable.com or put a comment in, whatever. You know how to reach us. This is a thing we want to keep doing. So we want to make it better and make it useful. So
if we don't put slides in the video, overlaying the video, we might just put a lot more details in the description of the video. So make sure you read the entire description when watching this video to see if there's any details we've already left, including the part numbers of items that he or I use in our RC rescues.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I can put the part numbers of those motors that I used. And I didn't mention this. I did talk about greasing the stuffing tube and the U-joints. I'm using this stuff. Grim Racer Speed Grease. Yeah, this was a grease put out by Aquacraft, which was Hobbyco's boat division back when Hobbyco was independent. So that's how long I've had this tube of grease. You can see how much I've used since then. Not much at all. So I think it's one of those things where a little goes a long, long way, kind of like servo grease. I suspect I'll have this for years and years to come, but there are some off-the-shelf greases that you can get at the auto parts store that a lot of people use for stuffing tubes and marine applications like this. So I'll have to figure out what those are. I looked it up one day and then I bought some and I've forgotten what it was.
Well, I can tell you what I use. I have it actually in a grease gun on my boat trailer, and on my current trailer, I use marine axle or bearing grease.
Okay.
So I actually use that in my rod, my little thrust rod. What do we call it? Thrust tube?
The stuffing tube.
Stuffing tube, excuse me. So yeah, I'll pull the rod out and I'll wipe it down with the bearing grease.
Is marine bearing grease the same as regular bearing grease, but twice the price?
Probably.
Yeah.
But it works real well on my pro boat.
Let's not even talk about Harley Davidson bearing grease.
When you hear that pro boat humming, you know you've run out of grease. So yeah, and you've taught me well. It's like when you start hearing it making some questionable noises, put that grease back in. And you're absolutely right. It does seem to make it run much better.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I think that's it for this first iteration of RC Rescue. We'll do more, and yes, we'll do planes, we'll do cars, we'll do all the things. Hopefully a lot of planes. I think that's where most of our audience is, their interest lies. But you get what you get. If you don't like it, start your own podcast.
I'm foreshadowing or predicting rather that there's going to be one episode that's real short and it says, if you get a plane like this, and it's just a photo of it going in the trash. It's like, you're done. Some can't be rescued.
That's a viable thing to talk about too, because I've thrown away plenty of stuff I've pulled out of basements. Remember the airplane with the spray foam inside?
Foam injection?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's one I would probably just put in the trash.
Yeah.
You're not generating enough lift to overcome that added weight.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm actually getting a ring upstairs. So that's probably a good signal to bring this to a close. And Lee, thanks for joining me and asking questions. And let's do this again sometime.
You bet.
Please visit our website at rcroundtable.com. That's where you will find all of our podcast episodes. You can also find a little bit of background information about the show host and leave comments and suggestions about the show. There are links to a few of our favorite vendors and also links to our various social media accounts. Thank you for watching and listening.